Whispers in Willow Creek. Part 1. The Arrival. Willow Creek was the kind of small town you'd pass by without giving it a second thought. Nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, it had that quiet, untouched feel, where everyone knew each other, and secrets rarely stayed hidden. After years of city noise and the relentless rush of urban life, I craved exactly that kind of peace. I had just bought an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, a place that stood silent and proud despite its peeling paint and creaky wooden floors. The real estate agent had called it a fixer-upper with potential. I like to think of it as a home with a story. The first day was filled with boxes and the smell of dust. I explored every room, fascinated by the faded wallpaper and the ornate fireplace that dominated the living room. The air was thick with the weight of years of memories tucked away like old photographs. Neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves. Most were polite, offering a quick smile and welcome, but there was something guarded in their eyes, a hesitation I couldn't quite place. As night fell, the house settled with groans and creaks, like it was breathing. I chalked it up to age and tired myself enough to fall asleep quickly. But just as the clock struck midnight, a whisper brushed through the hallway, so soft I thought I might be dreaming. "Help me." I sat up, heart pounding, eyes scanning the darkness. The hallway was empty, but the chill lingered. I told myself it was just my imagination, the house playing tricks on a newcomer. Still, sleep was elusive, and I lay awake wondering what stories this old house held, and whether I was ready to uncover them. Part 2. First signs. Morning light filtered softly through the curtains, painting the old walls with a golden hue that momentarily erased the fears of last night. I tried to shake off the unease, convincing myself that the whisper was nothing but the wind playing tricks on an old house. But as I moved through the rooms, small oddities began to nag at me. A door I was sure I'd closed stood slightly ajar. A picture frame hung crookedly on the wall, though I hadn't touched it. And there was that faint scent of something. Old wood mixed with something I couldn't identify, like decay, but not quite. Determined to keep busy, I ventured into town. Willow Creek's streets were lined with maple trees, their leaves rustling gently in the autumn breeze. The locals went about their days quietly, their smiles polite but distant. I stopped by the diner, where the waitress served me coffee with a quick, "Welcome to Willow Creek." But her eyes avoided mine. On my way back, I noticed a flyer posted on a lamppost, a missing persons report from decades ago. The name, Eleanor Whitman. A shiver ran down my spine, especially because the address listed was the very house I now called home. That night, the whisper returned, clearer, more urgent. "Leave." I wrapped myself tightly in a blanket, trying to convince myself that it was just stress playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew Willow Creek was holding its breath, and I was standing in the middle of a secret that refused to stay buried. Part 3. The Shadow in the Hallway. The nights grew colder and heavier. I found it harder to dismiss the strange occurrences as mere imagination. One evening, as I prepared to turn in, a sudden chill swept through the hallway outside my bedroom. The lights flickered briefly, and in that fleeting darkness, I saw it, a shadow. It was tall and slender, shifting just beyond the corner of my eye. When I turned to look directly, it vanished. My pulse quickened, and my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the light, but the fear rooted me in place. As I stood frozen, a soft whisper echoed again, barely audible but unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." The next morning, I noticed my phone's battery had drained completely overnight despite being fully charged. More unsettling was the old, faded photograph I found on the floor beside my bed. It was a portrait of a woman, her eyes deep and haunting, like they were staring straight into my soul. Questions flooded my mind. Who was she? Was she Eleanor? Why was I feeling like I was being watched, hunted even, by something beyond explanation? I realized the house wasn't just old or creepy, it was alive with memories and something darker lurking beneath. Part 4. The Old Diary. Driven by the mysterious photograph and mounting unease, I decided to explore the attic, a dusty, cramped space filled with forgotten relics. Hidden beneath a moth-eaten blanket, I discovered a worn leather-bound diary, The cover was cracked and faded, but the name Eleanor Whitman was etched faintly on the front. Opening the diary, I was pulled into Eleanor's world. Her loneliness, her fears, and the creeping darkness she described with chilling detail. She wrote of shadows that moved on their own, voices whispering in the night, and a secret that threatened to consume her. As I read, the house seemed to grow colder, the air thick with a sorrow I could almost touch. Eleanor's final entries were frantic, filled with pleas for help and warnings to stay away. It was clear now. The woman in the photograph had lived here, trapped in a nightmare that had never ended. I closed the diary, heart pounding. Somehow her story was now a part of mine. Part 5. Unseen Presence. After finding Eleanor's diary, the house seemed to shift in ways I couldn't ignore. The shadows that once flickered quietly now grew bolder, stretching across rooms like dark fingers reaching for something, or someone. That evening, as I sat in the living room reading Eleanor's frantic last entries, a cold draft swept through the air despite every window being closed tight. The candle flame flickered wildly, casting eerie shapes on the walls. I felt a presence, unseen but heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The whispers returned, louder this time, almost pleading. Help me. Free me. Objects moved on their own. The old rocking chair in the corner began to sway slowly, as if pushed by invisible hands. I jumped, my heart racing, unsure if I was losing my mind or if the house was truly alive with something supernatural. Trying to stay grounded, I called Sarah, a neighbor who had offered to help me settle in. When she answered, her voice was tense and hurried. You need to be careful. That house, it's more than just haunted. It holds something dark, something dangerous. She told me stories I hadn't heard before, of people disappearing, strange rituals, and a town that closed ranks to protect its secrets. The more she spoke, the heavier the feeling in my chest grew. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every whisper, every flicker of shadow made me jump. I felt watched, hunted, as if the house itself was testing me, waiting to see if I'd break. I didn't know what I was up against, but one thing was clear. I wasn't alone anymore. Part 6. Sarah's Warning. The morning after my unsettling phone call with Sarah, I met her at the small cafe nestled on Main Street, a place where the scent of fresh coffee mixed with the faint undertones of old wood and whispered conversations. She arrived looking tense, her eyes darting nervously around the room like she expected someone to be watching us. I wasn't sure you'd take me seriously, she began, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly, but there's a lot about Willow Creek that outsiders don't understand. Sarah explained that the town had a history darker than its quiet streets suggested. Eleanor Whitman's story wasn't unique. Over the years, people had vanished without a trace, and strange occurrences around the old Victorian house were just the tip of the iceberg. There's a secret society here, Sarah said in a low voice. They're descendants of the town's founders, bound by a pact to protect Willow Creek from something ancient. She leaned closer. They believe that darkness lives beneath the town, and to keep it at bay, sacrifices were made. Eleanor tried to expose them, but instead, she was silenced. The house became her prison. My stomach churned as I realized how deep the roots of this mystery went, far beyond a haunted house or ghostly whispers. It was about power, fear, and a darkness that had shaped the town itself. Sarah's warning was clear. I needed to be careful who I trusted. The townspeople weren't just hiding secrets. Some of them were willing to do whatever it took to keep those secrets buried. Leaving the cafe, I felt the weight of her words settle over me. The house wasn't just a place of restless spirits. It was a gateway to something much darker, and now I was caught in the middle. That night, the whispering returned, more urgent, more desperate. Leave before it's too late. But I couldn't leave, not yet. Part 7. The Night Visitor. The night air was thick with a chill that seemed to seep into my bones as I sat alone in the dimly lit living room. The house had grown quieter somehow, but the silence felt heavy, like a waiting breath just before a storm. The only light came from the flickering flames of a candle on the mantel, casting dancing shadows that stretched across the worn wooden floors. I was trying to steady my nerves after Sarah's warning, replaying her words in my mind, the secret society, the ancient darkness, the sacrifices. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me right then, right now. Suddenly, a faint tapping at the window startled me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Outside, framed by the pale glow of the moon, stood a figure. Tall and still, its face hidden in shadow. For a moment I thought I might be dreaming. But the cold seeping through the glass told me otherwise. I swallowed hard, wanting to ask who or what it was, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished into the night. A soft whisper brushed my ear, barely audible but unmistakable. "Help me." I spun around, but the room was empty. Only the flickering candle remained, its flame trembling as if in fear. That night, sleep was impossible. Every shadow seemed to twist and crawl. Every creak and groan of the house felt like a warning. I was no longer alone in the house, and whatever had come to my window was desperate, trapped, and reaching out for help. In the days that followed, the presence grew stronger. Doors would open and close on their own. Cold spots appeared in rooms I had just left, and the whispering voices multiplied, layering over each other until I could barely think. I found myself walking the halls at odd hours, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever haunted this place. I wanted answers, but every step brought more questions. Who was this trapped spirit? What had happened to Eleanor? And what was the true price of staying in Willow Creek? The answers felt just out of reach, like whispers on the wind, waiting for me to listen closely enough. Part 8. Strange Dreams. The line between sleep and wakefulness blurred into something unsettling as night after night brought the same tormenting visions. My dreams no longer offered rest, but a haunting window into Eleanor's shattered world. In these vivid dreams, I wandered the shadowed hallways of the Victorian house, the wallpaper peeling and the floorboards creaking under invisible footsteps. Eleanor's voice echoed through the dark corridors, soft, pleading, desperate. Sometimes I would see her silhouette flicker at the edge of my vision, only to vanish when I turned. One particular dream stayed with me long after I awoke. I was trapped in the basement, surrounded by faint, flickering lights and strange symbols scrawled on the walls. A cold hand brushed against my arm, and Eleanor's voice whispered, "Find the truth before it's too late." Each morning, I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding as if I had run a race. The house's oppressive silence during the day felt like the calm before a storm. Heavy and expectant, the dreams began to seep into my waking hours. I found myself distracted, my thoughts consumed by the fragments of Eleanor's life and the darkness that claimed her. I could almost feel her presence lingering in every corner, watching, waiting for me to act. One afternoon, I returned to the attic, clutching Eleanor's diary, desperate for answers. The air was thick with dust and memories as I flipped through the fragile pages, searching for clues. Her handwriting grew more erratic toward the end, a mirror to the fear that gripped her. The diary spoke of a hidden room somewhere in the house, a place Eleanor believed held the key to breaking the curse. I resolved to find it, hoping that uncovering the truth would bring peace. To her and to me. But as night fell again, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Find it, before they come. The they haunted my mind. Who were they, and were they watching me, as they had Eleanor? The house had become a prison of shadows and secrets, and I was trapped inside. Part 9. Hidden Room. Fueled by Eleanor's diary and the chilling dreams, I became obsessed with finding the hidden room she had mentioned. Every corner of the house was scrutinized under my flashlight's beam. Every creak, every cold draft seemed to guide me. One rainy afternoon, as the wind battered the windows, I found a loose wooden panel in the basement wall. My hands trembled as I pried it open, revealing a narrow, dust-choked passageway. The air was thick, with the scent of mildew and old secrets. With nothing but a flickering flashlight and Eleanor's words in my mind, I stepped inside. The passage was tight and suffocating, forcing me to crouch as I moved forward. At the end was a small chamber, its walls etched with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. On a worn wooden table lay relics, faded photographs, a broken locket, and a crumpled letter penned by Eleanor herself. Her shaky handwriting detailed her growing terror, her warnings about the dark forces at work, and a desperate plea for someone to end the curse. As I read, a sudden chill swept the room. The door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. Heart racing, I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam trembling as it scanned the walls. Shadows shifted and seemed to close in, and whispers filled the air, growing louder, frantic. I forced myself to stay calm, whispering Eleanor's name, hoping for guidance or mercy. The oppressive presence pressed against me, cold and unrelenting. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open slowly, and the room's glow faded. I stumbled out, breathless, clutching the letter. Back in the main house, I realized this chamber wasn't just a hiding place. It was a prison. A place designed to trap spirits and dark secrets alike. I knew then that breaking the curse wouldn't be simple. It meant confronting whatever force had held Eleanor, and maybe others, captive for decades. The house was a labyrinth of pain and mystery, and I had only just begun to unravel its threads. Part 10, The Town's Dark Secret. After escaping the hidden chamber, clutching Eleanor's letter, I knew my investigation would lead me beyond the house's walls. The house was just a piece of the puzzle. The real darkness lay within the town itself. The following day, I wandered through Willow Creek, searching for clues about the secret society Sarah had warned me about. The town seemed idyllic at first glance. Quiet streets, quaint shops, friendly faces, but beneath the surface, something felt off. At the local library, I dug into old newspapers and town records, piecing together stories of disappearances, strange rituals, and whispered warnings. The deeper I delved, the clearer it became. For generations, the town's leaders had kept a pact with an ancient force, offering sacrifices to protect their prosperity and safety. I found references to a group known as the Keepers, descendants of the original founders, who enforced the pact with ruthless efficiency. Eleanor had tried to expose them, and they had silenced her, trapping her spirit in the house to serve as a warning. Word spread quickly in the town, but whenever I confronted locals, their expressions hardened, or they suddenly refused to speak. It was as if an invisible wall had been raised, shielding the truth. Sarah confirmed my fears. "They protect the town at any cost," she said, "and anyone who threatens to expose them disappears, just like Eleanor." I realized I wasn't just facing a haunted house. I was up against a powerful, secretive force embedded deep within Willow Creek. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous my situation became. I could feel the eyes of the town watching me, their suspicion and hostility growing by the day. I had to act fast, or risk becoming the next victim lost to Willow Creek's darkness. Part 11, Isolation. As I plunged deeper into the town's dark secrets, I felt an invisible barrier tightening around me. The friendly smiles I once received had vanished, replaced by cold stares and hurried whispers when I passed by. The very air of Willow Creek grew thick with suspicion and fear. Phones that once rang now fell silent. Messages went unanswered, and the internet connection in the house became erratic, as if someone, or something, was deliberately cutting me off from the outside world. Sarah's visits grew less frequent, her once confident demeanor shadowed by growing fear. Days slipped into nights, and the loneliness weighed heavily. The house, once a symbol of my fresh start, became a cage. Every creak and groan echoed like a warning. The shadows seemed to watch me, closing in tighter with each passing hour. One evening, I found myself trapped in the living room as a sudden blackout plunged the house into darkness. My flashlight flickered weakly, illuminating the familiar but now menacing walls. I heard footsteps upstairs, slow and deliberate, but no one was there when I checked. I realized then that Willow Creek wasn't just haunted by spirits. It was alive with the town's fear and hostility. The secret society wasn't content with silence. They wanted me isolated, broken, afraid to speak. But despite the fear, a flicker of defiance burned within me. I wasn't going to let them win. The question was, how long could I hold on before the town's darkness consumed me completely? Part 12, Breaking Point. Isolation gnawed at me like a relentless beast, Days bled into nights, each one darker and colder than the last. My mind teetered on the edge of sanity, fraying under the weight of fear and exhaustion. The house seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow a reminder that I was never truly alone. Sleep became a battleground. Nightmares dragged me back into Eleanor's tortured world. I'd wake up gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, the feeling of cold fingers clutching my wrist lingering long after I was awake. The line between reality and nightmare blurred until I no longer trusted my own senses. One evening, after a day filled with unanswered calls and heavy silences from the townsfolk, I sat in the living room, trying to ground myself. But the house had other plans. A sudden gust swept through, extinguishing the candles. The temperature plummeted, and a whisper slithered through the darkness. "You can't escape." Panic surged through me as unseen hands seemed to press against my chest, squeezing, suffocating. I collapsed to the floor, fighting for breath, my mind screaming to break free. When the pressure lifted, I lay there trembling, tears streaming down my face. The house had broken me, or maybe I had broken myself. Yet, amidst the despair, a stubborn ember of resolve sparked. I refused to be a victim. Not Eleanor. Not me. This nightmare was far from over, and I was determined to find the way out, no matter the cost. The path ahead was dark and treacherous, but I had to confront whatever haunted Willow Creek, and myself. Part 13. The Confrontation. The breaking point forced me into action. I couldn't wait for answers to find me anymore. I had to face whatever haunted the house head-on. Armed with Eleanor's diary, a flashlight, and a shaky resolve, I descended into the basement's hidden chamber once more. The air was thick, heavy with a presence that pressed down on my chest. Shadows shifted and writhed on the walls, seeming almost alive. I called out, voice trembling. "Eleanor? If you're here, show yourself. What do you want from me?" The darkness congealed into a form, a woman with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. Her voice was an echo, soft and haunting. "I am Eleanor, trapped by those who feared the truth. Free me, or suffer as I have." She told me about the secret society, the pact they made with a dark force to protect the town at a terrible cost. Eleanor tried to expose them, but they imprisoned her spirit in the house as punishment. Her pain was palpable, a heavy weight that pressed on my soul. I knew freeing her would mean confronting the darkness itself, a force that had thrived on fear and silence for generations. The house creaked ominously, as if warning me of the danger ahead. But I couldn't turn back now. I promised Eleanor I would find a way to break the curse and end the town's suffering. But the path would be perilous, and I was no longer just a curious stranger. I was a player in a game far older and darker than I had ever imagined. Part 14. The Truth Revealed. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind as I left the basement's hidden chamber. Her story wasn't just a ghost's lament, it was a chilling confession of a town's darkest secret. Determined to uncover the full truth, I delved deeper into Willow Creek's history, desperate to understand what I had stumbled into. At the local library, ancient tomes and brittle newspapers revealed a disturbing pattern. Decades ago, the town's founders had made a sinister pact with an unknown force, exchanging the souls of innocents for prosperity and safety. This pact was guarded zealously by a clandestine group known only as the Keepers, whose descendants maintained the curse, ensuring the town's survival at a terrible price. Eleanor had been one of them, someone who dared to defy the Keepers. Her attempts to expose the pact resulted in her being silenced and trapped, her spirit bound to the house as a warning to others. As I pieced together this grim history, a horrifying realization dawned on me. My own family was entwined with the town's legacy. An old photograph tucked inside Eleanor's diary depicted a younger version of my grandfather standing among the Keepers at a secret ceremony. This revelation shattered my understanding of who I was and why I had been drawn to Willow Creek. I was not an outsider. I was part of the town's dark lineage. The weight of this truth was crushing, but it also gave me a new resolve. To free Eleanor and myself, I would have to confront not just the supernatural forces, but the legacy of my own bloodline. But the Keepers wouldn't relinquish their power easily. Their reach extended into every corner of Willow Creek, and I was fast becoming their next target. The haunting was personal now, and the battle for Willow Creek's soul had only just begun. Part 15, Race Against Time. With the truth weighing heavy on my shoulders, the urgency to act became overwhelming. Every moment I stayed in Willow Creek, the shadows grew darker, the whispers louder, and the sense of impending doom more tangible. The curse wasn't just a haunting, it was a ticking clock counting down to something catastrophic. Sarah and I devised a plan. We would perform a ritual that, according to Eleanor's diary, could break the pact and free the trapped souls, including Eleanor's. But the ritual was dangerous, steeped in ancient rites, and requiring rare items scattered throughout the town. Relics hidden away by the keepers to maintain their control. Time was against us. The keepers were aware of my investigation and had begun to tighten their grip. Strange figures watched from shadows. Warnings were left at my doorstep. Every step toward the ritual was met with resistance, subtle threats that chilled me to the bone. Gathering the relics meant venturing into places long forgotten. An abandoned chapel, a sealed crypt, and the very heart of the forest where the pact had been forged. Each location tested our resolve, exposing us to both physical danger and the weight of the town's dark history. The night before the ritual, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, haunted by visions of Eleanor's torment and the looming presence of the keepers. The air around the house felt electric, charged with anticipation and fear. As dawn approached, I steeled myself. This was no longer just about uncovering the past, it was about shaping the future, breaking free from a legacy of darkness, or becoming part of it forever. The race against time had begun. Part 16, Unexpected Ally. Just as the weight of the town's secrets threatened to crush me, Sarah appeared at my door one stormy night, drenched and desperate. Her usually steady eyes were wild with urgency. "I can't let them win," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "There's a way to end this, but it's dangerous." Sarah revealed that she had once been part of the Keepers, the secret society that ruled Willow Creek. She left when she realized the true horror of their pact and the sacrifices they demanded. Now, haunted by guilt and fear, she wanted to help me break the curse and free the trapped souls, including Eleanor's. Together, we planned the ritual, gathering the necessary relics and preparing for the confrontation with the darkness that had gripped the town for generations. Sarah's knowledge of the Keepers proved invaluable, guiding us through secret passages and forgotten rites. But trust was fragile. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the Keepers were closing in, determined to stop us at any cost. As we stood in the basement's hidden chamber, the air thick with anticipation, Sarah whispered, "This is it, no turning back." I nodded, heart pounding, knowing that this ritual would change everything, for better or worse. Part 17, Preparation and Tension. The days leading up to the ritual were filled with an uneasy tension that wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. Every step we took to prepare felt heavy with consequence. Sarah and I gathered the relics, a tarnished silver dagger, a vial of ancient ash, a faded cloth embroidered with strange symbols, each item steeped in history and power. We cleansed the hidden chamber, drawing protective circles and inscribing symbols on the walls as Eleanor's diary instructed. The air felt charged, alive with unseen forces that shifted and whispered just beyond our senses. Sleep became elusive. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and strange noises echoed through the house at all hours. The weight of what was to come pressed on my chest, mixing fear with a strange sense of purpose. Sarah and I shared few words, our focus on the looming ritual. Yet beneath the surface, a fragile bond was forming, born of shared danger and a desperate hope to end the darkness once and for all. The townsfolk's hostility grew. Mysterious figures watched from a distance, and strange symbols appeared on my doorstep, warning me to stop. But I was too far gone, too determined. On the eve of the ritual, we prepared the chamber with candles, herbs, and the relics laid out in precise patterns. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting. As the clock neared midnight, I steadied my trembling hands, knowing that the coming hours would define not just my fate, but the future of Willow Creek itself. Part 18, The Ritual Night. Midnight cloaked the house in a thick, suffocating darkness. The only light came from the circle of flickering candles Sarah and I had painstakingly arranged in the hidden chamber. The scent of burning sage mixed with the musty air, filling the room with a strange, almost electric energy. I stood in the center of the circle, clutching the tarnished silver dagger, heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah began to chant in a low, rhythmic voice, her words ancient and unfamiliar, yet somehow powerful. The walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm, shadows lengthening and twisting as if alive. As the ritual progressed, the temperature plummeted. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like icy fingers. A low, mournful wail echoed through the chamber, rising and falling like a tide of despair. Suddenly a dark shape emerged from the shadows. Eleanor's spirit, her eyes glowing with sorrow and relief. She reached out to me, her voice a desperate whisper. "Thank you, but the darkness fights back." The chamber erupted into chaos. Shadows surged, swirling like a storm, attempting to engulf us. Candles flickered and went out, leaving us in near-complete darkness. I gripped the dagger tightly, the only anchor in the storm. Sarah's chant grew louder, her voice steady despite the chaos. Slowly, the shadows began to recede, withdrawing like a wounded beast. Eleanor's form brightened, her sorrow turning to peace as the oppressive darkness lifted. When the final words were spoken, a profound silence settled over the chamber. The air felt lighter, freer, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. But as we stepped outside, the chill remained, a reminder that some darkness never truly disappears. Part 19, Aftermath and Eerie Calm. The morning sun filtered weakly through the cracked curtains, casting a pale light over the old Victorian house. The oppressive weight that had hung over Willow Creek and its people seemed, at first, to have lifted. The heavy silence that had once felt suffocating was replaced by a strange, uneasy calm. I moved through the rooms cautiously, half expecting the shadows to creep back or the whispers to resume. But for now, there was only silence, a silence so profound it felt almost unnatural. Eleanor's spirit, once a flickering shadow of sorrow, now seemed at peace. I felt it in the air, a gentle warmth that hadn't been there before. The diary lay closed on the dusty table, its final entry a simple message of thanks and hope. Yet beneath the calm, subtle signs suggested the haunting was not entirely over. Strange symbols, faint and almost invisible, appeared etched into the wooden floorboards in places I had never seen before. Cold spots lingered in rooms that should have been warm. The townsfolk's demeanor shifted slightly as well. Some approached with cautious smiles as if relieved, but others held on to their secrets tightly, their eyes wary and unreadable. The secret society's hold might have weakened, but it was far from broken. As I stepped outside, the crisp autumn air bit at my skin. The trees swayed gently, but the wind carried a whisper, soft, almost playful, reminding me that Willow Creek's story was far from finished. I realized then that while the ritual had freed Eleanor and weakened the darkness, some shadows never fully fade. They wait, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to return when least expected. For now, the house was silent, but the whispers remained. A haunting reminder of the past and a warning for the future. Part 20. Life attempts to return to normal. In the days that followed the ritual, I tried desperately to return to a sense of normalcy. The house no longer groaned under the weight of unseen forces, and the whispers that had haunted my nights faded to distant echoes. Yet the scars left behind were far from healed. Every creak and shadow still made me flinch, a reminder of the battles fought within these walls. Sleep came easier, but my dreams remained troubled, haunted by flickers of Eleanor's sorrow and the darkness we had faced. I ventured into town, greeted by cautious but softer expressions. Some neighbors offered tentative smiles, while others averted their gaze, burdened by secrets they no longer dared share. Sarah remained by my side, a steady presence amid the uncertainty. Our bond deepened, forged in fire and fear, but trust remained fragile. We both knew the darkness we had faced was not gone, only dormant. The Keeper's grip had weakened, but the legacy they left behind was a wound that might never fully heal. Still, life pushed forward. I returned to unpacking boxes, planting flowers in the neglected garden, and trying to fill the old house with light and warmth. It was a small rebellion against the shadows that had nearly consumed me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood on the porch and breathed in the crisp autumn air. The town looked peaceful, almost inviting, but I knew better. The silence held secrets, and the past lingered in every corner. Despite it all, I felt a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, Willow Creek could one day be free. Part 21, Uneasy Peace. Weeks passed since the ritual, and Willow Creek seemed to breathe a tentative sigh of relief. The oppressive darkness that had cloaked the town began to dissipate, replaced by an uneasy peace that hung in the air like morning fog, thick, uncertain, and ever-shifting. Inside the old Victorian house, the atmosphere felt lighter, though remnants of the haunting lingered. Faint whispers occasionally stirred in the quietest moments, subtle reminders that the past was never far away. I kept Eleanor's diary on my bedside table, its worn pages a testament to the battles fought and sacrifices made. Sarah and I worked to rebuild trust within the town. Some locals embraced the possibility of change, while others clung stubbornly to old secrets, wary of the consequences that truth might bring. The keepers' influence had waned, but their legacy remained, woven into the fabric of Willow Creek like a stubborn stain. Life resumed its rhythms, mornings filled with golden sunlight, afternoons spent tending the garden, and evenings warmed by the soft glow of lamplight. Yet beneath the surface, a current of vigilance ran through me, a constant awareness that darkness could return when least expected. One night, as I stood on the porch watching the stars emerge, a soft breeze carried a whisper, barely audible, almost like a sigh. It was a reminder that while the battle had been won, the war for Willow Creek's soul was ongoing. Despite the uncertainty, a fragile hope took root within me, that even in the face of shadows, light could persist, flickering, fragile, but unyielding. Part 22, The Return of Shadows. Just when I thought the darkness had finally loosened its grip on Willow Creek, signs of its return began to creep in like a slow, insidious fog. It started with small things, shadows that lingered too long in the corners of rooms, doors that creaked open by themselves, and whispers that floated through the night, barely audible but unmistakable. One evening, while tending the garden, I noticed the plants wilting despite the care I gave them. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the malevolent presence was stirring once more. The house, though quiet during the day, seemed to breathe with an unsettling life at night. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances, sensing that the ritual's effects were fading. The keepers, or whatever force they had bound to protect the town, were not done yet. Their hold was resilient, and the darkness was patient. The townsfolk grew distant again, their eyes clouded with fear and suspicion. Some whispered about curses reborn and old sins refusing to die. The atmosphere in Willow Creek thickened, and the uneasy peace shattered. Determined not to let history repeat itself, Sarah and I began preparing again. Researching, gathering protective talismans, and fortifying the house with symbols and wards. We knew that the battle ahead would be even more dangerous, but retreat was not an option. The shadows had returned, but so had my resolve. I wasn't going to let Willow Creek fall back into darkness. Part 23, The Gathering Storm. The return of the shadows cast a long, cold shadow over Willow Creek, and the town seemed to brace itself for a storm none of us could fully comprehend. The nights grew longer and colder, and the whispers transformed into urgent warnings that seemed to echo from every corner of the old Victorian house. Sarah and I intensified our preparations, poring over ancient texts and forgotten rituals that might bolster our defenses. The relics from the previous ritual were no longer enough. We needed something more powerful, a way to sever the bond the keepers had forged with the dark force once and for all. Word of our defiance spread quietly through the town, drawing the attention of those still loyal to the keepers. Strange figures lurked in the shadows, their intentions clear and threatening. Our every move was watched, and trust became a scarce commodity. One evening, as a storm raged outside, a knock came at my door. It was an elderly man, a recluse known only as Old Tom, who claimed to possess knowledge of an ancient artifact, a relic said to hold the power to break curses and banish darkness. With little choice, we welcomed his guidance, hoping that this artifact could be the key to saving Willow Creek. But Old Tom warned us of the dangers ahead, that the storm gathering over the town was not just of weather, but of fate and fury. As lightning cracked the sky, I realized that the battle for Willow Creek was entering its most perilous phase. The darkness was rising, but so was our determination. Part 24. Old Tom's Tale. Old Tom sat across from me in the dimly lit kitchen, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharpness that cut through the shadows lurking in the corners of the room. He began his story in a low, gravelly voice, weaving tales of Willow Creek's founding, a town built not just on land, but on secrets and blood pacts. The ancient artifact, he explained, was forged centuries ago by the town's original settlers to contain the darkness they had unwittingly unleashed. This relic, he said, pulling a small, tarnished amulet from his coat pocket, holds the power to break the chains binding the spirits and the curse itself. But it comes with a price. To wield it, one must face the darkness within themselves. Old Tom warned that the keepers had long sought to control the amulet, using its power to enforce their will and maintain their grip on the town. Recovering it would mean venturing into the heart of the old forest, a place said to be cursed and guarded by forces beyond human comprehension. As the storm outside raged, I felt the weight of the coming journey settle on my shoulders. The path ahead was perilous, filled with unknown dangers and tests of both courage and spirit. But it was the only hope left for Willow Creek. And for Eleanor's restless soul, Old Tom's tale was more than history. It was a call to arms. The battle for the town's future was no longer just about survival. It was about redemption, sacrifice, and the courage to face one's darkest fears. Part 25. Into the Forest. The morning was cold and gray as Sarah and I prepared for the journey into the ancient forest. The trees loomed tall and silent, their twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching toward the sky. A dense fog clung to the ground, swallowing the path ahead in a ghostly haze. Old Tom's warning echoed in my mind. The forest was cursed, alive with restless spirits and shadows that would test our resolve. Yet there was no turning back. The amulet was our only hope to end the curse, and finding it meant venturing into the very heart of darkness. As we stepped beneath the canopy, the sounds of the town faded away, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. The forest seemed to watch us, every rustle and crack hinting at unseen eyes, tracking our every move. Hours passed, the path twisting and narrowing, until we reached a clearing where an ancient stone altar stood, covered in moss and inscribed with symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. The amulet lay atop the altar, glowing softly, as if alive. But as I reached out to grasp it, a chilling wind swept through the clearing, and shadows coalesced into forms. Dark, twisted figures that moved with unnatural speed. The keeper's guardians, remnants of their dark power, ready to defend their secret. Sarah and I stood back to back, hearts pounding as the figures closed in. The battle was fierce, not just of strength but of will, as the forest itself seemed to resist our mission. In the end, we emerged battered but victorious, clutching the amulet, a symbol of hope and the key to breaking Willow Creek's darkest chains. The journey back was heavy with anticipation and fear, knowing the hardest part lay ahead, wielding the amulet to confront the darkness once and for all. Part 26. Facing the Darkness. Back at the house, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. Sarah and I prepared the hidden chamber once more, laying out the ritual items and tracing the protective symbols we had learned to trust. The amulet lay in the center, its faint glow casting eerie patterns on the walls. As night deepened, we began the ritual, our voices steady despite the fear tightening in my chest. The room seemed to pulse with energy, shadows twisting and growing until the darkness coalesced into a tangible form. A swirling mass of rage and despair, the embodiment of the curse. The air crackled as the darkness lashed out, testing our will. I clutched the amulet tightly, feeling its warmth seep into my skin, grounding me. Sarah's chants rose in strength, weaving an ancient melody that pushed against the shadows. The battle was not just physical, but spiritual. A fight for the very soul of Willow Creek. Memories of Eleanor's torment, the town's sacrifices, and my own fears surged through me. The amulet responded to my resolve, glowing brighter with every heartbeat. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the amulet, piercing the darkness and scattering it like smoke. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a profound silence filled with relief and hope. When the light faded, the chamber was empty. The darkness defeated, the curse broken. Eleanor's spirit appeared one last time, her eyes shining with gratitude before she vanished, finally free. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah and I embraced, knowing that Willow Creek had been given a chance at a new beginning. Part 27, A New Dawn. The first light of dawn spilled through the windows, bathing the old Victorian house in a soft golden glow. After the ritual, the air felt different, lighter, as if the house itself was finally breathing freely. The heavy shadows that had clung to every corner were gone, replaced by a warmth I hadn't felt since I arrived. Sarah and I sat quietly, letting the calm wash over us. The battle we'd fought had left us both drained, but there was an undeniable sense of hope in the silence. Eleanor's spirit was finally at peace, and the dark legacy that had haunted Willow Creek for generations was broken. Outside, the town seemed to awaken with new energy. Birds sang from the trees, and the streets buzzed with cautious optimism. People ventured out, their faces lighter, smiles tentative but real. The grip of fear and suspicion that had shadowed the community was loosening. I walked through the garden, noticing the flowers beginning to bloom where only weeds had thrived before. It felt like a sign, a symbol of renewal, not just for the house, but for the entire town. Yet, even as hope blossomed, I knew healing would take time. The wounds left by decades of darkness wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, Willow Creek had a chance to heal, to reclaim its future, free from the shadows of the past. Sarah and I made a silent promise to protect that future, to stand vigilant against any darkness that might try to return. The story of Willow Creek was far from over, but now it was a story of resilience, courage, and hope. As the sun rose higher, I felt a peace settle within me, a quiet certainty that we had changed the course of history. The darkness had been defeated, and a new dawn had arrived. Part 28, Rebuilding Trust. With the darkness lifted, Willow Creek began the slow process of healing. The townspeople, once guarded and suspicious, started to let their walls down. The air of fear that had suffocated the community was gradually replaced with cautious hope. Sarah and I made it our mission to rebuild the fractured trust between neighbors. We organized small gatherings in the town hall, evenings filled with stories, shared meals, and tentative smiles. It was a fragile peace, but it was a start. The old Victorian house became a symbol of change rather than fear. I opened its doors to the community, inviting those who had long been kept away by superstition and secrets. Together, we cleaned, restored, and filled its rooms with light and laughter. Eleanor's story, once a whispered warning, became a shared history, a reminder of what the town had endured and overcome. It bonded us, strengthening the fragile threads of community. Yet, beneath the surface, some scars remained. The legacy of the keepers still lingered in whispers and shadows. But Sarah and I vowed to stay vigilant, guarding against any resurgence of darkness. Rebuilding trust was the hardest part of all, but it was also the most important. Willow Creek's future depended not just on breaking curses, but on healing the hearts and minds of its people. As the seasons changed, so did the town, slowly, surely, moving toward a brighter tomorrow. Part 29, Shadows Linger. Despite the progress, shadows still lingered beneath Willow Creek's surface. Though the curse was broken, the scars left behind were deep, and old fears died hard. Some townsfolk whispered in hushed tones about strange happenings, unexplained noises, fleeting figures in the twilight, and a chill that seemed to follow certain paths. Sarah and I paid close attention to these signs, knowing that darkness had a way of returning when least expected. We kept the protective symbols in place and continued our rituals, no longer as desperate measures, but as acts of vigilance. The old Victorian house remained a center for the town's healing, but it also became a watchtower, a place from which we could monitor the subtle shifts in the town's energy. One evening, as dusk settled, I caught sight of a shadow moving just beyond the tree line. It vanished before I could get a clear look, but the cold dread it left in its wake was unmistakable. I shared the sighting with Sarah, and we agreed to prepare for whatever might come next. The battle for Willow Creek's soul was not over, it had simply entered a new phase. Despite the unease, I felt stronger than before. The darkness no longer held power over me. It was a challenge, a test of resilience. And this time, I was ready. Part 30. The Warning Signs. The town of Willow Creek was slowly stitching itself back together, yet the faintest whispers of unease still curled through the cool evening air. The comforting light that had returned after the ritual was now flickering in places I hadn't expected. Dark corners of the house, abandoned alleys in town, and even in the eyes of some neighbors. Sarah and I kept vigilant, knowing that remnants of the curse might still linger. The protective wards we had drawn continued to glow faintly at night, a reminder that the darkness hadn't completely vanished. One night, a series of strange events began to unfold. Animals in the forest grew restless, howling at unseen forces. Power flickered throughout the town. People reported nightmares filled with shadowy figures and chilling voices calling their names. Most alarming of all, an old town clock tower, silent for decades, began chiming at midnight without cause. The sound echoed across the town, chilling and unnatural. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the cold dread that had become an unwelcome companion. Something was stirring beneath the surface, a warning that the peace was fragile and might soon shatter. Sarah and I prepared ourselves once again, ready to face whatever darkness awaited. The battle for Willow Creek's soul was far from over. Part 31. The Midnight Toll. The midnight chimes of the old clock tower reverberated through Willow Creek like a death knell. No one could explain why the silent monument suddenly awoke, tolling with a deep, mournful sound that sent chills down the spine of every resident. That night, the town was restless. Windows shuttered tight, footsteps quickened, and the usual hum of nightlife fell eerily silent. The air itself seemed charged with an unseen energy. A tension that prickled the skin and whispered of danger lurking just beyond sight. Sarah and I met at the Victorian house, our safe haven and battleground. The wards glowed faintly, but even their light seemed dimmer, as if struggling against an encroaching darkness. We shared what little information we had, piecing together the events since the clock tower's toll. Reports came in of fleeting shadows near the forest's edge, strange symbols carved into trees, and townsfolk waking from nightmares drenched in sweat. It was clear that the curse's remnants were awakening, fueled by whatever force had reanimated the clock tower. Determined to confront this resurgence, Sarah and I prepared for the worst. We gathered relics, sharpened our resolve, and reviewed the rituals that had once brought relief. But this felt different, heavier, more ominous. As midnight approached again, we stood together in the hidden chamber, hearts pounding. The silence was shattered once more by the tolling clock, louder and more insistent, echoing like a call to battle. The darkness was coming. And this time it wasn't just a haunting, it was a reckoning. Part 32. Into the Darkness. The moment the clock struck midnight, a chilling silence fell over the house. The familiar glow from the protective wards flickered uncertainly, as if signaling a weakening barrier. Shadows gathered in the corners, stretching and writhing like living creatures hungry for release. Sarah and I stood firm in the hidden chamber, surrounded by relics and symbols of protection. Our breaths came in shallow gasps, nerves stretched tight like a taut wire. We had faced darkness before, but this felt different, more alive, more desperate. Suddenly a cold wind swept through the room, snuffing out the candles and plunging us into near total darkness. The shadows surged forward, forming shapes that whispered our deepest fears. Memories of Eleanor's torment, the town's sacrifices, and our own doubts threatened to consume us. I clutched the amulet tightly, its faint warmth a fragile lifeline. Sarah's voice rose in a chant, steady and strong, pushing back against the darkness. The room pulsed with energy as ancient words filled the air, weaving a protective web around us. The battle raged not just around us but within. The darkness clawed at our minds, seeking to unravel our resolve. But together we stood unbroken, our combined strength a beacon of light in the encroaching shadow. With a final surge, the amulet flared brilliantly, banishing the shadows into nothingness. The protective wards glowed brightly once more, and the oppressive weight lifted, leaving behind a calm that felt almost unreal. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah and I shared a look of relief and quiet determination. The fight was far from over, but we had proven that Willow Creek's darkness could be challenged and defeated. Part 33. Echoes of the Past. The night after the intense battle, the house felt both empty and alive. The oppressive darkness had lifted, but the echoes of the past lingered in every creak and sigh of the old Victorian walls. Sarah and I sat together in the quiet room, the glow of the protective wards casting soft shadows. Exhaustion weighed heavily, but the relief of survival was palpable. Yet neither of us could shake the feeling that the battle had stirred something deeper. We pored over Eleanor's diary once more, searching for clues, answers, anything that might prepare us for what was still to come. The pages told of sacrifices made, of sins buried deep beneath the town, and of a darkness that was more than just a spirit. It was a legacy. As dawn broke, a new understanding settled between us. The curse was not a single entity, but a chain of events, decisions, and secrets that had bound the town for centuries. To truly free Willow Creek, we needed to unravel that chain, piece by piece. Outside, the town was waking, unaware of the battles fought in the shadows. But Sarah and I knew that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, shaping the present and threatening the future. We steeled ourselves for the journey ahead, a path that would take us beyond hauntings and rituals into the heart of Willow Creek's darkest secrets. Part 34. Secrets Beneath the Surface. With the morning light casting pale beams through the dusty windows, Sarah and I delved deeper into the history of Willow Creek. We visited the town's archives, poring over yellowed documents and faded photographs that spoke of a time long buried. We discovered records of unexplained disappearances, cryptic letters, and old court trials that hinted at a shadowy organization exerting control behind the scenes. The Keepers weren't just a secret society. They were the town's hidden rulers, manipulating events and silencing those who dared oppose them. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that breaking the curse required exposing these buried truths. But fear gripped the town tightly. Many wanted to forget, to pretend the past never existed. Our investigation led us to a forgotten underground chamber beneath the town hall, sealed for decades. Inside, we found relics and documents that confirmed the Keepers' dark dealings and their pact with a malevolent force. The chamber itself seemed to hum with residual energy, a reminder that the past still held power. Sarah and I knew that revealing these secrets would not only challenge the town's history, but put us in even greater danger. But the truth was the only path to freedom, and we were ready to face whatever shadows remained, no matter the cost. Part 35. The Unveiling. The tension in Willow Creek thickened as Sarah and I prepared to reveal the truth hidden beneath decades of silence. We gathered the evidence from the underground chamber, documents, relics, and old records that exposed the Keepers' dark pact, their grip on the town. We organized a town meeting in the old community hall, a place once filled with laughter and now heavy with anticipation. As the townsfolk gathered, whispers rippled through the crowd, eyes wide with suspicion and fear. Some came with hope, others with anger. Standing before the community, I shared the history we had uncovered. The sacrifices made in the name of prosperity, the lives lost, and the darkness that had been allowed to fester. I spoke of Eleanor, her spirit trapped by the Keeper's cruelty, and the ritual that had freed her. Reactions were mixed. Some were grateful for the truth finally brought to light, while others refused to accept the painful reality. Old wounds reopened, and long-buried grudges resurfaced. But amidst the turmoil, a new resolve took hold. The town began to understand that healing required facing the past honestly, no matter how painful. The path forward was uncertain, but together we could rebuild Willow Creek on a foundation of truth and trust. As the meeting ended, I looked out over the crowd, faces etched with fear, hope, and determination. The darkness had cast its long shadow, but the light of truth was beginning to shine. Part 36, Rebuilding the Future. The days following the town meeting were charged with a mix of emotions. Some townsfolk embraced the newfound truth with courage, eager to rebuild a community unshackled from secrets. Others grappled with denial, clinging to old beliefs and fears. Sarah and I worked tirelessly to foster healing. We helped organize cleanup efforts around the town, restoring old buildings and opening the Victorian house as a community center. It became a place for sharing stories, art, and memories, transforming from a symbol of fear into one of hope. The rituals and protections remained in place, but now they were symbols of vigilance rather than desperation. Slowly the atmosphere lightened, replaced by cautious optimism. Yet even in progress, I remained aware of the fragility of peace. The darkness that once ruled Willow Creek had left its mark, and vigilance was necessary to ensure it never returned. With each day I felt stronger, more connected to the town and its people. The legacy of Eleanor and the sacrifices made were a reminder that courage and truth could break even the deepest curses. Willow Creek was healing, and so was I. Part 37, New Threats Emerging. Just as the town began to breathe easier, a new tension crept beneath the surface. The peace we fought so hard to build felt fragile, as if the darkness we battled had left lingering echoes waiting for a chance to rise again. One afternoon, while helping organize the community center, Sarah received a strange message, a symbol carved into a tree near the forest's edge, one none of us recognized. It wasn't the familiar markings of the keepers, but something older, more sinister. Whispers of unexplained disappearances returned, and some townsfolk reported seeing shadowy figures at night, far from where the previous hauntings had occurred. The feeling of being watched settled over the town like a cold fog. Determined not to ignore these signs, Sarah and I revisited the old diaries and texts, searching for anything that might explain the new threat. We uncovered references to an ancient force predating the keepers, an entity bound beneath the forest, waiting for release. Our resolve hardened. Though weary, we knew the fight was far from over. Protecting Willow Creek meant confronting this new darkness head-on, no matter the cost. Part 38, Unearthing the Ancient. The discovery of the unfamiliar symbol carved into the tree sent a ripple of unease through Sarah and me. Unlike the familiar markings of the keepers, this sigil was jagged and primal, pulsing with a dark energy that felt far older than the town's haunted history. Determined to understand the threat, we sought out the oldest records in Willow Creek's archives, fragments of folklore and forgotten tales whispered by ancestors long gone. They spoke of an ancient entity imprisoned beneath the forest, a malevolent force that predated the Keeper's pact and had been bound by powerful rituals to keep it from consuming the land. The entity was called the Withered One, a spirit of decay and despair that fed on fear and sorrow. Its prison was fragile, maintained by the faith and vigilance of generations. But the weakening of the old protective rituals after the curse's initial breaking had loosened its bonds. Sarah and I realized that while the Keeper's darkness had been defeated, a deeper evil now stirred. The town's survival depended on finding a way to reinforce or renew the ancient seals, a task made more urgent by the strange disappearances and sightings in the forest. We prepared for a journey into the heart of the woods once more, armed not only with relics, but with knowledge and determination. This time, the battle wasn't just for Willow Creek. It was for the very soul of the land itself. Part 39, Into the Heart of the Forest. With the weight of the ancient threat pressing on us, Sarah and I prepared for our most perilous journey yet, into the deepest part of the forest, where the Withered One's prison lay hidden beneath centuries of earth and secrecy. The forest greeted us like a living beast, its thick canopy blotting out sunlight, and its floor a tangle of roots and decay. Every step felt heavier, the air dense with a mix of damp earth and an almost tangible sense of dread. Shadows moved in the corners of our vision, and distant whispers teased at the edges of our minds. Using the ancient map we'd uncovered in the town archives, we navigated toward a clearing marked with weathered stones and faded runes, the site where the original seals had been placed. The ground was scarred as if the earth itself bore wounds from some long-forgotten battle. As we began the ritual to reinforce the seals, the air grew colder, and a low growl echoed through the trees. The Withered One stirred, its presence manifesting as a creeping darkness that slithered along the ground like living smoke. Sarah and I worked quickly, chanting the ancient words and placing relics around the clearing to form a barrier. The darkness lunged, trying to disrupt our efforts, but our combined resolve held firm. Minutes felt like hours as we battled the encroaching shadow. The forest seemed to hold its breath, caught between light and darkness, hope and despair. Finally, with a blinding flash, the seals reactivated, glowing with a fierce blue light that pushed the darkness back into the earth's depths. The forest stilled, the oppressive weight lifting as the ancient entity was once again confined. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah and I knew this victory was only temporary. The Withered One's prison was fragile, and vigilance would be required to keep the darkness at bay. But for now, Willow Creek was safe, and the forest's whispers fell silent once more. Part 40, A Lasting Vigil. The forest breathed a quiet sigh of relief as the ancient seals glowed faintly beneath the fading moonlight. Sarah and I stood together in the clearing, the weight of exhaustion settling deep into our bones. We had faced darkness older than the town itself, and for now we had prevailed. But victory came with a heavy price. The Withered One's prison was fragile, and the knowledge of its tenuous hold pressed on us like a constant shadow. We knew this battle was not the end, but the beginning of a lifelong vigil. Returning to Willow Creek, we found the town slowly healing, the people growing stronger with each day free from fear's grip. The Victorian house, once a symbol of dread, now stood as a beacon of resilience and hope. Sarah and I committed ourselves to protecting Willow Creek, not just through rituals and relics, but by fostering community, truth, and trust. We worked to ensure that the past shadows would never again consume the future. Though the whispers in the forest had ceased for now, we remained watchful. The darkness could return, but so could the light. And we were ready. Together we would keep the vigil, guarding Willow Creek's soul against the shadows that sought to reclaim it.